Okay, everybody, welcome to today's session. I'd like to introduce, first of all, my name is Grant Potter. I'll be facilitating the session. I'd like to introduce Andrew Blanco. Andrew Blanco comes to us from the Learning Games Network. He holds a BS and a MBA from Cornell University, and he recently completed a graduate degree in Technology, Innovation, and Education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Andrew and get the session rolling.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate the introduction. As Grant was saying, I'm from the Learning Games Network. As I walk you through this presentation this afternoon, I want to give you a little bit of background about our organization and what we're all about, as well as a little bit about the value of games, just so that we're on the same page before we get to the presentation that really focuses on the open educational resource that we're working on, which is the Interactive Social Learning Environment Platform. You may have noticed that on the schedule, it was an Interactive Social Language Education Platform. The initiative has done a little bit of a name change because while we are initially really focusing on language education, this platform really could be used for basically any type of gaming experience that folks would want to build on top of it. So that's a little bit behind the name change. Just to give you a background about the Learning Games Network, this is our team, and as I'll elaborate a little bit further in the next couple of slides, while this is the core of the folks, we really work with a lot of different people, and part of our whole mode of operating is to partner with other folks, other organizations, and really expand the field of gaming for education. So just to walk you through, this is Scott Osterweil and Eric Klopfer, who are both at MIT. Kurt Squire up at University of Wisconsin-Madison, as well as Constance Steinhuler. Alex Chisholm is out in Boston with us as well. Dan Roy out in Boston, he's one of our game designers. Sherry Wright, who is actually going to this idea of a virtual organization. She works with us up in Northern California. And then, of course, Jim G. and Henry Jenkins, who are on our board, as well as Constance, who I mentioned. Just to give you a little bit of an idea about why this organization was created, we're a relatively new organization, being in operation for about a year. Our vision is to create new connections for the future of education. But I think it's fair to say that everyone that's here at the Open Education Conference probably has a very similar vision. But to get a little bit more specific, our mission is to not only to foster improved design, production, and distribution of new games, but also to identify existing best practices and strategies so that we can work with folks, support educators with teaching materials, just so that they can take what's being created and put it to use in the best ways. And finally, to explore emerging business development opportunities. I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of great resources that come out of academia, especially in the gaming arena, that are, I don't want to say test cases, but are piloted experiences. But to really get those great resources out there where students can actually use them, you need to really have great partnerships to distribute those activities out. So what I want to really emphasize, and you'll see this further on in the presentation, the process network that we really employ to create these games goes to the point that I made earlier, that while there's a core group of folks that are the Learning Games Network, we do partnerships, work with other folks, collaborate as widely as possible. So we have a bunch of different directions in which we partner with other folks, be it distribution, working with folks that can get the games in front of more folks, design and development. We have folks that are working with us in California that are as I get to it later, we're working on an English language learning project. The folks that provide the expertise in how to teach English to English language learners are folks that we bring into the network and so that we can benefit from their expertise. Professional development, that goes to the previous bullet in terms of providing support for educators that want to use games with their students. Production, you'll see later on that we don't have software developers that are part of the Learning Games Network, but we partner with commercial software developers in order to create some of the work that we're doing. Design teams is something that we're really excited about. That's something that's coming up this fall. We're going to be working with students, primarily high school students, but also students a little bit older, and really work with them so they understand a lot of what goes into designing games for education, and also having them available to help us really test some of the games that we're creating and serve as that conduit for feedback from actual end users. And it's fair to say that for outreach, reaching out to all of these different folks, different organizations, different partners is something that we're really intent on doing in trying to create this ecology of folks, whether they're in academia, whether they're in production, whether they're doing research, whether they're educators that are actually working with students. All these folks are people that we're reaching out to in order to really broaden this field. So to give you a little bit of background of how the Learning Games Network came to be, back in the day, Microsoft's Game to Teach project kicked off at MIT. They did some interesting work that eventually morphed into the Education Arcade. And just to go back, excuse me. Scott, who I mentioned earlier when I had the team slide, he's been involved with games like Zumbinis. I think that's probably the game that folks are more likely to be familiar with. The Education Arcade is well known for some of the augmented reality games that they've been doing, using handhelds for scientific inquiry type games. This is a game called Lure of the Labyrinth that was a partnership between the Education Arcade and Maryland Public Television, which is a math game for middle school students, which I highly recommend you check out. It's pretty cool. IQ is a partnership with NBC and Education Arcade. Generation Cures, I'll let you go to the site so you can find out what G for CMIB stands for. But this is a game that's been created with Children's Hospital Boston and centers on scientific process of discovery and the role that philanthropy plays in that. But finally, this is Zenas, and this is what I came to the Open Education Conference to talk about. Our executive director, Alex Chisholm, was here last year at the conference talking a little bit about the work that we were doing. And I'm pretty excited about this, and I'm glad that I have the opportunity to come and share this with you. Before I really get into what this game is all about and how we're creating it, I just want to get a feel for how many people here play video games. Okay, we got a few.
My son does for me.
For those of you that do play, what kind of games do you play?
Warcraft, that kind of stuff.
Warcraft, okay. Strategy games, okay. One of the things I want to emphasize is that we make games that are fun. That when it comes down to the bottom line, if it's not something that's fun to play, its value, it's not. If it's not a fun game, why would anybody want to play it? I think that's the bottom line. But I wanted to take a step back and talk about a few things that we usually discuss when we talk about the value of games. I might have more success. Excuse me, success with this. Do we have any golfers? Does anybody play golf? All right. Normally, if there were golfers, I would ask them what the overall goal is, and typically, get the ball in the hole. And I would ask, well, wouldn't the easiest way to get the ball in the hole just be to pick it up, walk down the fairway, and drop the ball in the hole? But as you'd expect, that's not really fun. That's not the point of golf. The point of golf is that you're willingly submitting yourself to arbitrary rules, and that in itself allows you the opportunity for play. So as I was saying, we usually talk about 4 different freedoms when we talk about play. The first is the freedom to experiment, and I think it's fair to say, would you say, Grant, that when you're playing Warcraft, there's a level of experimentation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Things don't happen right the first time, right?
Discovery, yeah.
Okay. And I think it's fair to say that the flip side of the freedom to experiment is the freedom to fail. If any of you were in the presentation yesterday that the folks from the medical school at the University of Michigan were putting on, one of the key factors that they talked about in describing the process in which they created their project was their ability to fail. Like their leadership told them, we'd really like you to create this product, but if it doesn't work out, that's okay. And they really attributed a lot of their product's process to that freedom. Third freedom is the freedom to try on new identities. And again, I think Warcraft is a great example. When you're in the game world, you're not you. You can create an identity that's better suited for that environment. And this actually brings to mind something that I read last week. Hopefully all of you are familiar with John Hughes. Everybody's seen The Breakfast Club? Maybe? Okay. So I was reading an article last week about John Hughes' death, and they were talking about The Breakfast Club. And the author was talking about how growing up, she wasn't quite in high school when the movie came out. And she had it in her mind that the stereotypes that were in The Breakfast Club were exactly what everybody in high school would fit to. There's going to be an athlete, there's going to be a princess, there's going to be the nerd. And she found that, some folks could argue that, yes, people do meet those stereotypes. Other folks would say, no, not necessarily. But going to the value of games and thinking about the freedom to try on new identities, you may not necessarily be the most studious student in a class, but when you're in a game, the game doesn't really care. If you're playing in a multiplayer game, the other folks don't know who you are. You're just another player in the environment. And I really think, especially when we think about learning languages, when you're becoming somebody that's communicating in a different language, in a sense, you really are trying on a new identity because you're communicating in an entirely new way. Finally, the fourth freedom that I want you all to keep in mind is the freedom of effort. And I think that this is really important. When I was in school, and probably similarly for all of you, there wasn't really variable effort that was expected of you. You were expected to come in and do what was asked of you. But I want you to consider, okay, I'm going to try one last time. Does anybody play tennis? Any tennis players? Okay. So sometimes you want to go out and just hit the ball around, right? But sometimes you actually want to keep score and play really hard. So when we think about the freedom of effort, there really is that opportunity to really go play your hardest, keep track of every little point, or conversely, just go out there, have fun, hit the ball around. And so things like games really allow you to have that opportunity, that flexibility to expend as much effort as possible in the experience. Or if you just want to play around, just not go all out, you have that opportunity with games. So I want to talk a little bit about Zenas and Isle. I think we're all on the same page regarding games and kind of where we're coming from. So what I just showed you was Zenos, and I want to make sure that I separate the two. So Isle is the platform. It's being built on Drupal. It's going to be open source. And the next box that's going to pop up here is actually the folks that are developing it from a technical standpoint. Isle's going to be open source. Other folks will be able to take it, create their own game environments on top of it. While it's based on Drupal, the activities themselves, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes, are all created in Flash. However, what's exciting about it is that there's a global learning object database that's part of the Drupal installation that really has all of the learning objects, all of the words, all the parts of language that has all the metadata. So the Flash activities can reach in there, pull out those learning objects in order to populate the activity. When players are playing, all of that data is going to be captured from their play sessions. And then educators, be it teachers, parents, whoever, that the players' accounts are tied to will be able to go in and see a dashboard of the activities that they've been involved in, what their success rates have been, where they're having trouble, and be able to take that actionable intelligence from the system. So it's not going to be a thing where you play and then at the end it's going to quiz you. We're really not trying to create courseware. We are trying to create a gaming environment. So all of the assessment will take place during the gameplay. So going to the slide, as I mentioned earlier, Hewlett Foundation OER initiative is our funders. If I didn't mention earlier, that is where our funding has come from, and I want to thank the Hewlett Foundation for giving us the opportunity to create this. We're actually leveraging work that was initially done by Coastline Community College down in Southern California. It's called The Forgotten World. It is a similar type of experience that's meant for middle school students in China, and it's actually being piloted right now. That experience is much more linear. It's chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, but is running off of the underpinnings that we're working with. We in the Education Arcade were involved in some of that work, but then, pardon me. So the supergroup here is our technical partner. Going back to the discussion that we had earlier about collaboration, we are partnering with a firm called the Supergroup that's actually doing a lot of the technical work in terms of creating the platform and also creating some of the games. So, also Fable Vision, which is Boston-based. So when we got the grant to do this world and this platform, I should back up and say that the English language learning activities that we're creating right now are primarily for Spanish-speaking students in the U.S., but it'll be open for students anywhere to use. So we're partnering with folks from the Games Learning Society group in Madison, Wisconsin, for thinking about how to do mobile extensions so that we can have mobile devices that will interact with the platform and also provide further opportunities for activities. The U.S. Department of State, through their English Access Online program, will be creating activities with the supergroup on top of the platform, separate from the Zenas world that we're creating. And then looking forward, we're going to be working with other developers that want to create activities on top of the platform and have them integrated into the Zenos world, working with educational distributors who would like to add gaming to their mix of products, working with media organizations to help distribute the games and also bring players to the experience. So really what we're trying to do is create this ecosystem, as I was mentioning earlier, so that while the Learning Games Network has these relationships with all these different folks, there's other people that are creating games, that it's not all about us creating games on this platform, but really opening it up so that other folks can take advantage of the APIs into the IO platform, or create game modules that can also communicate with the platform within the Zenos world. So now that you have a little bit of an idea of how we're going about creating it and what our intent is, I have a demo of some of the activities that we've created so far. So if you'll give me a moment. So there's no audio, so I'll give you the running narration of what's going on. When you saw the entire island, there were a couple different hotspots where you could click and zoom in. So this is an activity called Breaking News. As you could see right before I went to the screen, it was kind of a library background, library setting. So the approach that we're taking to creating these English language learning games is a very communicative approach. I like to think about the difference between a spelling bee and playing Scrabble. In a spelling bee, either you know how to spell it or you don't. It's a very binary type of situation. In Scrabble, you have a whole bunch of letters. You have to pick and choose what words you might be able to make. You have to make choices about the point values, what would work best with the other tiles. So in this game, players have to create a headline for a newspaper. And as you probably saw when it was setting up, the minimum number of players is 3. And that's because, as you'll see in a little bit, there's going to be voting. So the way this works is that each player gets 5 cards, and you're allowed to throw away 3 cards and get replacements. So what happened here is that one player put in their headline, they completed it, the other 2 players both put in their headlines, and then there's this voting stage. So this is my colleague Dan, who did this screen capture. He won this round. And I'll show you some of the other intricacies when we go to the next round. And I should note that we edited it down so that you don't have to sit through the parts where he's actually thinking about what sentence should I, or what phrase should I build, In writing it, he edited it a little bit. We edited that out so you didn't have to sit through all of that. You can see that there's opportunities to pull down prepositions to try to make words fit. And I should also mention that because this is the beta, these are our example words. So it'll be a little bit different when it's ready for students. But you can see that there's different numbers of points on each one. What you really have to do, in my mind, is weigh the number of points that you might get if you do win with what phrase you want to create that's going to be appealing to your other players. So I think in this example, yeah, Dan won again. All of these activities go through 10 rounds, and we're not going to have you sit through all 10 rounds because that would just be really long, and eventually you'd kind of get the gist. And so you can see it jumps to the final score sheet where you see that I actually won that time, so that was great. So this is a headline game. In a few seconds, it should jump to another game that is under development. Again, is another multiplayer game. Minimum number of players is 3. And again, it has a very similar mechanism where there's voting involved. So going back to the island, you can see that there's another neighborhood in the island that you can click on, zoom into. This is the waterfront area. And again, all of this artwork was done by one of our commercial partners. The game development was done by the other commercial partner. So this isn't something that we're using our own personnel to do. We're partnering with other folks that have these capabilities. So this game is called Tailspin, and this is a collaborative storytelling game. And I think this is really cool because I saw play testing of this with middle school students a couple months ago. Long before it was all pretty, it was basically just a white screen with you could move with areas for data entry. The kids got really, really into it. And what was interesting was to see how their behaviors changed over the course of 10 rounds as they started to see what types of sentences were winning, how they needed to create some of their sentences. So the gist of this is the game gives you a starting point by giving you a sentence. Everyone writes the next sentence. And you may have seen, and I'll get out of the way so you can, at the very bottom, there's a bunch of bonus words that have different points allocated towards them. So you can use those words and get the bonus. But again, if it doesn't make sense, if it's difficult to take those words and integrate them into something good, you may not be voted, and you may not have the opportunity to change the course of the story. So here, Dan had added the first sentence that won. So he's already taken the first opportunity to steer the story in the direction that he wants to. So let me see. Are they using the bonus words in this one?
So essentially, what's happening? Everybody who's playing the game submits a sentence.
Exactly.
The participants then get an opportunity to vote for the sentence they think is the best. They don't know whose sentences they are.
Exactly. So it's blind. You don't know. Like here, you see on the voting screen, you don't know who else is playing with you. So if you're in a classroom playing with your classmates, you don't know that it's your buddy's sentence that you should vote for. You only find out until after voting is completed. And then you can see in this, when you go back to creating the next sentence, you see who's already won the previous rounds.
Which one of the people writing here knows how to speak English?
All of us. So yes, this is not with English language learners right now. This was my colleagues and I creating a video that would be available to show you.
Write your thesis too? You sit around with your committee and
After the gentleman yesterday was talking about writing a thesis on the wiki, this could be the next thing. I think you might need more than 10 rounds though. So basically, this goes through the same process through 10 rounds and goes to the same screen that you saw earlier.
The minimum of the number of players required is 3.
Correct.
Is there a maximum?
Right now, 7. And the minimum is just so that if you're playing against one other person, obviously there's not much of a point in voting. It's not so much fun. But I think if anyone has questions, we can use the remaining time for Q&A or for discussion. I'm excited to get people's impressions.
Is there anything that can be done for vocal like speaking, or is it all writing and reading?
One of the game modules that we have in development right now will take advantage of voice over IP. So it'd be similar to the name of the game always escapes me, unfortunately. Similar, where you're not permitted to use certain words to describe the target word. Taboo. So it's a similar game to that.
What proportion of the Zenas world is complete? Are you at 30%, 20% about?
I think it's right now we have these two modules fairly close to completion. We'd really like to do somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 activities, so that when you go to that initial world, you can zoom into the different neighborhoods and really explore to find different activities. One of the things that's really important to note, I'm glad you asked that, we do want to have it be an environment where students can go and they can say, oh, I really like this game, I want to keep playing it. At a certain point, we'd like it so that there's diminishing returns. Like, you really don't get that many more points from playing a game that you've mastered. Because of the technical underpinnings, it will give you more challenging language over time as it understands what your capabilities are. Conversely, as opposed to just being like a free-form thing where you can just do whatever you want, for educators that would like to use this with their students, we will have paths through some of the activities. So it won't just be like, hey, go and do whatever you want, but it will be a path where you can assign students to play these activities and then these activities. And that's something that's going to be part of the experience.
So if we want to take these games,
sure,
and move them into a different, like teach Japanese, what would be involved?
Well, right now we're creating these modules with these activities for English language learners, but our hope is that the Zenos world can be a place where people from all different languages can come and learn languages other than English. The intent that, actually, let me go back. So the reason why we chose this island metaphor, where you can, if this was a larger zoomed-in photo, you could really see that there's no particular style of structure that you would say, aha, this island is in this part of the world. The reason that we chose this was that we wanted to create it as a place, like a trading port, where there would be people from all different parts of the world, all together, so that basically going there, you would be hearing all different languages. So our hope is that this will evolve into a place with other activities for learning other languages. In terms of, I think you mentioned Japanese. These activities, again, they're funded by the OER initiative, so they'll be open source, these Flash files, in addition to the platform. So if developers want to create games that would be appropriate for this, or take the platform and create their own site for language learning or for any other type of subject matter, that's always a possibility. But we really hope it to become a site that anybody could come to learn any language.
Flash is difficult to develop in. Do you create shells, sort of take, like the generic games? Will they be able to use those generic shells to modify those slightly to put their own content in?
Flash capabilities are pretty ubiquitous in terms of what the development landscape is like. So our hope is that folks that do have those capabilities will see this and be able to take advantage of it. When you say the shells, do you mean?
Well, a shell, for example, those are, I would call those game shells. And somebody comes along with a different vocabulary. Sure. The preferred words all change. The game stays, but the content changes because the keywords that are being fed into there are different.
Sure. I mean, with a platform being open source, folks can take the GLO database and do as they may. And
those
sure.
are also pretty advanced language learning games. Those are what I would call them. That people aren't learning the language; they're perfecting their language.
Sure.
Do you have lower level?
Sure. There's going to be. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
No, just lower level
Sure. The games themselves are meant to be for low, intermediate to intermediate English language learning students. So there is some expectation that they do have some knowledge of English. It's not someone that doesn't know a single word of English. But to answer your question, we will have a range of games. So while these may be for more advanced students that can manipulate language in this way, there will be a number of games. Some of the games that are currently being used with the Chinese middle school students we'll be bringing over to this. And those are all single player games. So a lot of them are for students with different capabilities. Yep, sure.
It seems like there are a lot of different criteria for voting, from clarity of meaning to poetry to rhythm, complexity. When people are voting, is there any way to figure out what kind of strategy they're using for prioritizing one sentence over another?
I think that just gets to the heart of the playfulness of the game. I mean, you need to figure out what's winning. To go back to the example that I gave of the playtesting session that I sat in on, there were, I want to say six or seven students, six I think, and one of the students didn't necessarily have the strongest grasp of English, and you could see that other folks, a core group of folks, continually won in the rounds when they were playing the storytelling game. But she started to sense what type of sentences that folks were really voting towards. And although her, as I was saying, her English skills weren't the strongest, she was able to convey ideas in a way that the other folks began to vote for. So I guess if the question is there a way that you can set a criteria, like saying this round or this game we're going to vote for the funniest, or this round we're going to vote for ones that rhyme. Right now that's not really something that we're anticipating. It's something more that happens during play.
I think that's also something that adds to the richness of the game, is that each cohort group or how it comes through, it'll be slightly different, rather than actually trying to shape a sort of AI to allow those students to shape it.
Is there a provision for enabling the students to build their own games?
Right now, that's not something that we're envisioning, mostly because of the technical complexity of creating these games and ensuring that they're integrated into the Drupal platform, but also from a pedagogical standpoint, just ensuring that there's activities in here that that make sense from a learning perspective.
My last question is,
sure,
for an individual user who goes in there and plays this game, what kind of records are potentially kept that either they or their teacher could look at to see how they're doing?
Oh, yeah. So teachers will be able to log in if their accounts are linked to the students' accounts, and be able to see what activities they were playing, what types of language that they've been having success with, what areas they haven't been having so much success with. So with the metadata that's being created with the global learning objects, there will be a fair amount of information available for how they're making progress through some of the different levels, whether or not they're really taking advantage of all the activities or just concentrating on a few. Are you looking for a more specific?
No, I'm just wondering if you had analytics built in, or you
Sure.
So you're saying that tracking is possible.
Oh, absolutely. That's
deciding what analytics to add.
That's one of the things that's at the heart of why we're creating this platform, so that there is so much data capture and so that assessment can come from like the direct play. One of the opportunities that we're looking at right now is to take one step further and see how can we take all of that assessment data as all of this language is being coded. We are working with standards from California for English language learning. And one of the additional opportunities that may exist for teachers going forward is to see not just the data that is being created from the system in this dashboard, but also how is it tied to that curriculum. If there were publishing partners that wanted to have this data tied to or back mapped to any of their curriculum, that would also be a possibility. So. It's a lot of potential that we're looking at, but yeah, there's definitely one of the strong points is that there is visibility on learners' progression in the system.
With the vision of having it open source, on the instructor end, I mean, I'm presuming that because the only part of the open source is the source code, there's not going to be a configuration GUI for that, for the instructor
to manipulate what their dashboard looks like?
To manipulate the dashboard, to configure components to the game. Presumably that resourcing is going to come from that institution with the partnering of an instructor and a technologist.
That's a possibility. That is, like the idea of allowing end users on the educator side to personalize how they're viewing a lot of the data is something that we've been talking about, but we're not there yet. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? I guess I just want to leave you all with one final thought. Going to your question of the open source nature of the platform, and going back to all that I'd explained about the Learning Games Network, given that our mission is really to expand the base of folks that are doing great things with games in education, we're excited that this will lower the barriers for folks that want to get into this. So they'll already have this platform that can be used to create activities, and hopefully will spark a lot of other folks' imaginations and create great games that they can be using with students.